In this video, I would like to share with you today some very interesting real life stories that I would like to share to you today. So firstly, I would like to talk about my experience with Camp Wiwa, which in my opinion was one of the best school field trips that I have ever been on to this very day. It was also the only school field trip where we would all stay in the camp for the night. So what happened first was that I went to school, I stayed in class waiting for the buses to arrive. Then I got to meet up with my dad since parents were allowed to be chaperones for this trip. Then after nearly an hour on the bus, we would arrive there in the early afternoon, just in time to first unpack our bags, meet with the owners of the camp, then have lunch. For lunch, everyone had to pack their own lunches, so not everyone ate the same meal that I had. For lunch, my dad packed some empanadas for me and him to eat. Then after lunch, first thing we did was to take a tour of the camp. Then afterwards we would go and follow some hiking trails, as well as do some low ropes obstacle courses and then later wall climbing. After that, everyone including the teachers would go and play a modified version of Capture the Flag. We were all split up into two different teams, boys versus girls style. In the game, the boys lined up together on one end of the field, and for the girls they lined up on the other end of the field. I remember when my classmates were literally standing right next to me as they all shouted, "Build a wall! Build a wall! Build a wall!" Probably because of the very hot trend at the time, in which former President Donald Trump had insisted numerous times to build a wall dividing Mexico and the US. And many different individuals at the time took the proposal as a joke and applied it to numerous mostly irrelevant occasions that necessarily don't have anything to do with politics. They shouted the phrase, "Build the wall," numerous times, and then they eventually would all scream in warrior-like fashion, "Ah!" as they then started to tag the girls on the other team. After they were tagged by the girls or boys, these persons that they got tagged would have to say where their flag was, and if they answer correctly, the tagger can continue to catch other people, and the person who got tagged will be sent back to their base and try again. If they answered wrong, the tagger would continue to ask the victim until they answered correctly. I remember my teacher jokingly playing on the girls' team. Now, after the game concluded, for the rest of the remaining daylight we had, I would go and mill around for a few minutes until I found out that my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Wilinski, was playing in the Gaga pits with some of my classmates. And he invited me to come play the game with him, and so I did. At sunset, everyone would gather together in the cafeteria to have dinner, to which everyone was served by the chefs who worked in the camp. If I can remember correctly, I think we all had pizza that night. Then afterwards, several minutes after the last bits of light had vanished from the sky, we would come back out and gather in an outdoor pavilion where a snake expert made an oral presentation talking about the difference between non-venomous snakes and venomous snakes, as well as the many different kinds of those said snakes. I remember him saying on multiple occasions, "No touchy touchy," which was a line that Emperor Cusco from the Emperor's New Groove movie famously said. The snake expert repeatedly said that line simply to warn us of the dangers and the risks of encountering the dangerous snakes, as well as what would happen if we got bitten by them. After the snake presentation concluded, we continued to stay with each other as we were all rapping campfire songs, while we were all served no more than 2 different portions of s'mores. The second time we asked to have s'mores served to us, we had to wait a few minutes until they gave us the second portion of the s'mores. After we finished sitting around in the campfire rapping, we would all go back to our assigned cabins for the night. And although my friends and I would continue to stay awake and outside for a while, because I also found out that the boys and girls were playing pranks on each other on both Instagram and Snapchat. My friends and I would try to sneak into the girls' cabins, and when we were spotted, we would run back into our cabins. We repeated that several times until my teacher actually started to chase us back into the cabin. And although he came into our cabin, he announced his presence by jokingly saying, "Boo!" I reacted late, turning around 180 degrees and looking satirically shocked. Anticlimactically, he anyway started to give everyone a roll call simply to make sure everyone was present in their cabins for the night. When he called me, I said to him, "Hey, I'm here." After my teacher finished the roll call, we would continue to prepare ourselves to go to bed, which was change our clothes, brush our teeth, the usual. After a few minutes, it would now be lights out. For the first hour and a half of lights out, I had trouble with sleeping because some of the people in the cabin that I was staying at were goofing off on their phones, playing loud music as well as using Instagram and Snapchat on their phones. I remember that one of my classmates kept repeatedly saying, "Me too! No touchy touchy," as they repeatedly giggled without end. And another one of my classmates kept repeatedly shouting, "Shut up!" to make sure that everyone was quiet and that he wanted to sleep too. Then at around 1 a.m. was when I was finally able to rest. Yet unfortunately, we would not get enough sleep as after 7 a.m. we woke up for breakfast. Then afterwards, we packed up our belongings and then got back to our buses and got back to school. Shortly before we got back to school, however, I heard my teacher saying that it was optional for us to continue on with the classes for the rest of the school day. I myself wanted to continue on and finish up with my classes for the rest of the school day, but my dad decided against it. So therefore, I, along with a few other students, were dismissed early, as I and my dad finally went back home. In conclusion, even though I knew many people brought their phones to the camp, I was only one of the few people that did not bring their phones to the camp because number one, I totally forgot to bring my own phone, and number two, at the time my dad took away my phone privileges because of my behavior at home at the time. Moving on now, I'd like to tell you about this time back in 8th grade, where all the 8th graders, including me, were invited to see The Giver play live at the Bob Card Theater. So anyways, here's some background throughout the course of the second quarter. Throughout the course of the second quarter of 8th grade, which was between October to December 2019, all the English language arts teachers were instructed to make us read The Giver by Lois Lowry. The Giver is about a dystopian society where everyone had to give up the feelings of pain, strife, and emotional depth from their lives, an emotionless concept called sameness. In order to keep order, the society also lacks color, climate, terrain, and any sense of equality. Jonas, in whom he is the main character of this novel, is a 12-year-old boy who lives in that said society, where everyone, after becoming 12 years of age, are assigned a role that they will focus on for the rest of their lives. He was nervous about this and asked reassurance from his father, a nurturer who cares for the infants in the community, as well as his mother, who is an official in the Department of Justice. He is told by the elder, who signs the children of the careers are always right. Once the day finally arrived, Jonas is assembled with his classmates in order of birth. He was number 52. The chief elder who presides initially skips Jonas's turn, yet after the conclusion of the ceremony, they explain to him that Jonas had been given a special assignment, where he will be the receiver of memory. The position of the receiver has high status and responsibility, and Jonas quickly finds himself distant from the rest of his classmates, and even the rules about being the receiver further separate him, since he was not allowed in any way to play with his friends and require him to keep his training secret. They also allow him to lie and withhold his feelings from his family, things not allowed in the society. Once he begun with the training, Jonas's training makes it clear his uniqueness, as the receiver of memory is the person who bears the burden of all the memories throughout the history, and the only one allowed to access books beyond school books and the rule book issued to every household. The current receiver asks Jonas to call him the Giver, begins the process of transferring the said memories to Jonas, for the ordinary person in the community knows nothing of the past. And those memories, and being the only community member allowed to access books of the past, began receiving the perspective to advise to the Council of Elders. They asked for advice from the Council of the Elders. The first memory is about sliding down a snow-covered hill on a sled. Pleasantness made shocking by the fact that Jonas had never saw a sled, snow nor hills, and the memories of even things that had been given up to ensure security and conformity, which is sameness. Even color had been surrendered, and the giver shows Jonas the rainbow. Less pleasantly, he gives Jonas memories of hunger and war, which was something the boy had never seen before. Hanging over Jonas's training was the fact that the giver once had an apprentice named Rosemary, but the boy finds his parents and the giver reluctant to discuss what happened to her. Jonas's father is concerned about the infant at a nurturing center who is failing to thrive and received special permission to bring him home that night. The baby's name will be Gabriel if he grows strong enough to be assigned to a family. He had pale eyes just like Jonas and the giver. Jonas grew more attached to him, especially when Jonas found out that he can receive memories. Assuming Gabriel did not increase in strength, he will be, I quote, released from the community or taken elsewhere. This happened to an off-course pilot. Chronic rule breakers, elderly people enter the apprentice Rosemary. After Jonas speculates about life in elsewhere, the giver educates him by showing the boy hidden camera video footage of Jonas's father doing his job, releasing the smaller of two identical twin newborns through lethal injection before putting it in a trash chute, since identical community members are forbidden. There is no else there for those not wanted by the community, and those said to have been released have been killed. Since he will now consider his father a murderer, Jonas initially refused to return home, yet the giver convinced him that without the memories, the people of the community cannot know what they have been trained to do is wrong. Rosemary was unable to endure the darker memories of the past, and instead committed suicide with the poison. Jonas and the giver propose a plan to return the community's members so that they may know where they may have gone wrong. Both agree that Jonas will leave the community, thereby returning the memories to them, while the giver will stay to help them learn to live with their memories before joining his daughter Rosemary in death. They plan to fake Jonas's drowning to limit the search for him, but he instead had to escape in a rush with Gabriel upon learning of the child's imminent release. The two are near death from cold and starvation when they reach the border of what Jonas believes must be elsewhere. Using his ability to see beyond, a gift that he did not understand, he finds a sled waiting for him at the top of a snowy hill. Jonas and Gabriel ride the sled down towards a house filled with colored lights and warmth and love and a Christmas tree. And for the first time he hears something he believes to be music. The ending is not well explained, with Jonas briefly depicted as experiencing symptoms of hypothermia. Their fate has been further revealed in the subsequent books written by Lois Lowry, Messenger and Son, which were novels related to the Giver series written several years later. With the synopsis of the book out of the way, I feel that the field trip to the play was disappointing and anticlimactic, mostly because I didn't like how the actors performed on stage, and the rest of my 8th grade classmates were displaced to another classroom, just relaxing for the day. Eventually, a few days later, my parents and I watched the actual film, which was based on the Giver novel. And in my opinion, I thought that the titular movie was actually better than the play, despite the criticisms from Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic telling me otherwise, with their mixed to negative reviews. On the days leading up to the play, we were given several assignments about the Giver, to which I performed poorly on. Because of this, my grade in language arts was below a C for most of the time. Because of this, one night while watching MK Reddit videos on YouTube, my internet connection suddenly stopped working, and I finally realized that my dad implemented a web limit to shut down my internet connection from my computer at a specific time, which in this case was after 9 p.m., and then later 11 p.m. just for him to make me work on my assignments. Even though that actually proved to be ineffective because number 1, how could I be able to work on my assignments after 9 p.m.? And number 2, he did not implement the web limit to my phone, therefore I was still able to watch YouTube videos on my phone. Anyways, after that, my dad and teacher agreed and forced me to attend tutoring in the early morning one day just for her to make me redo my assignments that were mostly related to the Giver. And even after I finished the play, my teacher continued to force me to do reading counts assessments required by every student in English class to complete, which was graded. And I chose to quiz myself on the giver 2 more times, passing both of those quick assessments as my grades finally improved in my English language arts class for the rest of the year. Now I'd like to tell you about this time back on January 28, 2022, where it will be the first time I had ever experienced a bar fight in person, and also hopefully should be the last bar fight I've ever experienced in my life. So anyways, on the afternoon before the event, after I come back from school, I was on Roblox at the time playing Bloxburg as I was grinding tens of thousands of dollars every 24 minutes or so. And after a while of grinding shortly before 7 p.m., my mom told me that we were going to go out and eat at a restaurant called Island Wing Company, or IWC for short. That restaurant, to be specific, specialized in chicken wings, of course. And I enjoyed eating at the restaurant for the most part before the incident. But that was until that very night that got me to change my mind about the restaurant. Anyways, continuing on with the story. My mom invited only one of her friends to come and eat with us. We sat down, had just finished ordering our drinks while I was reading Wikipedia articles about the American interstate system. This was when all hell broke loose, as I started to hear women screaming in the table on the other side of the outside bar, as the men flipped over the tables on top of the other party that was involved in the fight. I saw some employees trying to restrain them from laying their hands on top of each other again. Yet the employees were unsuccessful at doing so, hence the fight continued. I saw them continue to push and punch each other around. Eventually the fight took to the streets, as I then later saw a black truck abruptly stop, as the truck almost crashed into them as the men continued to fight on the ground. Meanwhile, I heard a woman repeatedly shout, "Where's that bitch? Where's that bitch? Where's that bitch?" And then I heard at least 2 different gunshots, presumably coming out of the truck driver, where a man in their 20s was shot in the head and another man in their 30s was also shot elsewhere. The former man that I just mentioned involved in the fight had been reported to have life-threatening injuries as a result of the fight, while the other man was reported to have non-serious injuries. As soon as I heard the gunshots, we all took off running as fast as we could until we reached a nearby training gym called F45 in the same mall, where we told the employees about the situation. Then they let us hide in the storage room in the back of their building to ensure our safety and to prevent any injuries that we too could have sustained, to which we fortunately didn't. The employees called 911 and reported to the police about the incident, while I talked to my real-life best friend Ibrahim to explain the situation, and he reassured me that I was going to be okay. After hiding in the room for a while, we decided to get back to our own cars, as the restaurant closed for the rest of the night as police taped shut the building, as it was now already being investigated. After leaving the premises, we decided to instead go and eat at Bahama Breeze on the other side of the community, just to calm ourselves down and have another drink, since we didn't even order our food yet. How do I know about the fate of the aggressors? Because one of our local newspapers, Click Orlando, brought the situation to light, as well as West 2 News. In conclusion, this has to be one of the most traumatizing experiences that I've ever received in the outside world. And even though I didn't want to eat at IWC anymore, we nonetheless continued to eat at the said restaurant after a few months, for a few more times. Now I would like to tell you about this time period between September to November 2022, in which I often call it as a series of unfortunate events in real life. To some background, everything in my family was normal for me. It was very unexpected yet disappointing for me to experience disaster after disaster in those times. Before September 2022, I had stopped using Discord for 11 months, starting on August 11, 2022, and ending on July 26, 2023. In that time, I was playing some decent underrated showcase games on Roblox, including a few underrated core games similar to Pinewood Computer Core. I for a while felt calm again in and out of Roblox, as well as school too. For almost 1 year, until July 2023, I would take a trip down my own YouTube memory lane as I would rewatch one more time several of my favorite videos that I used to watch a long time ago. These specific videos I have watched between June 2012, when I started using YouTube, up until April 30th, 2021, just before I recovered my gabrielachilles account and rejoined the Pinewood Builders community for one last time. Several of those videos were from my favorite YouTubers at the time, which consisted of Smosh, New Age Server Alarm, Green Lego Cats 123, Typical Modders, Zach King, TV Filthy Frank and Disaster Music, and KRS 200, Dave Matson, Thunderbirds 101, Ireland Boys Productions, Force 13, Parashock X, The Tech Kid Realm, David Lopez, and many more. In those times, as well, I even decided to rewatch almost all the episodes of my favorite childhood TV shows, which was Augie and the Cockroaches, Angry Birds Toons, Zig and Sharko, The Garfield Show, Lazy Town, Wallace and Gromit, and Shaun the Sheep. Later throughout the month, I decided to volunteer for a few hours of community service as a teacher assistant in the Gift for Teaching warehouse. Shortly thereafter, on September 23, 2022, most of my happiness was halted when meteorologists began forecasts of a new storm that was set to hit Cuba and then later the majority of Florida, including the Orlando metro area, where I was positioned at the time. As the forecast of the storm striking Florida began to show up, I immediately started developing nightmares of what the worst case scenarios might look like. Like, for example, me potentially losing my home, my computer, and all my saved files on my Switch, or us having to relinquish our belongings and move elsewhere that's further inland. At first, I initially denied that the hurricane was going to hit Florida, but further forecasts began increasing the likelihood and the intensity of the hurricane at landfall, most of which were calling for a major hurricane landfall at Category 3 or 4 strength. After learning about the impending disaster, we then braced for impact as we bought loads of food to last for the disaster. And we decided to stop going out to eat until the hurricane dissipated, when most of the businesses in our area were back up again. But until then, we enjoyed a meal of steak, chicken, ciabatta bread, and Atlantic salmon and pinto beans at home. As Hurricane Ian intensified, so did the closures of the stores and parks near my home. My school followed suit and closed down the day before the hurricane hit our area on September 27, 2022. Eventually, we quarantined at home for a while until the disaster was over. I asked my dad if his boss would let us shelter in on the hotel for the duration of the disaster. They accepted his offer. However, they did not let my dog Nick to enter the hotel's premises. So therefore, we did not stay in the hotel. So we would decide to quarantine at home for a while until the disaster was over. I would occasionally record and photograph footage of the storm passing by my home with heavy rain and wind. In my position, the highest winds we received were of at most 70 miles per hour, borderline hurricane strength. I would regularly check the National Hurricane Center website every 3 hours for updated information about the hurricane. At the time the hurricane was at its strongest, we disconnected our computers until it passed, and in the meantime we decided to watch random movies and play cards for a while. Even better, we remained with power on the whole time. However, as we were getting ready for bed, our area was under a flood warning. Therefore, we decided to gather our documents into the bathroom, and we slept in uncomfortable positions in my bathroom, as I slept in a tub that I couldn't even fit in. Luckily, that night, we didn't receive a tornado warning. After the hurricane finally cleared Florida, I decided to walk outside my neighborhood as I would briefly inspect the damages that occurred to my nearby homes. I saw homes in which trees were downed as well as several fences being destroyed, the topsoil being disorganized, several branches debarked, and even one car that moved onto the grass because of the storm. Yet luckily, we didn't receive any kind of damage in our home. Yet unfortunately, one of my friends lost power in a close by apartment complex for several days. For the rest of the week, I stayed home as my father returned to work. I also briefly checked over the rest of our community to see the businesses still closed and several spots of minor damage. I am grateful because I knew the hurricane could have been stronger and that I would have received damage worse than what I saw at the time in my community. I was glad that I did not live anywhere close to Sanibel Island nor Fort Myers, which was where hurricane struck and was also at its strongest, or even anywhere near it. The worst part about it was that I was even angrier once I found out in the 2022 postseason analysis that the National Hurricane Center upgraded Hurricane Ian to a Category 5 of 160 miles per hour, with the hurricane being at Category 5 strength for roughly 6 hours, before weakening again to a Category 4, landfalling in Florida at 150 miles per hour. But the story doesn't end here. The day after my father had returned to work after the disaster, on October 1st, my father became exposed to COVID-19 while I was at work. This was because either his co-workers or hotel guests spread the virus to him through speech or possibly through unclean material. I didn't even notice the situation regarding his illness until 2 days later when his illness escalated. He returned home from work early as my mother stayed close by to him trying to comfort him when she shouldn't have, as she would too eventually get COVID-19 too. Because of this, I had to be isolated from the rest of my parents while being picked up from school as well as at home. Locked in my room playing Tornado Alley Ultimate on Roblox. I even had to eat lunch and dinner alone too. Yet on the bright side, their COVID case was not as critical like it used to be during the early stages of the pandemic back in 2020. Early 2020 to be specific. Eventually, the unfortunate had finally occurred. I succumbed to COVID. This all started on October 6, 2022 after being picked up from school. I had lunch with my dad at Firehouse Subs, and by sheer mistake, I made the life-threatening mistake of forgetting about social distancing of at least 6 feet away from each other, and after finishing my meal, I was already exposed to COVID, and the virus started to develop on me. Starting the next day, the illness began to materialize, as my throat started to become sore, and a headache started to materialize as well, and in sexual terms, I had temporarily lost all my libido because of my illness. I initially did not pay much attention to my symptoms until midnight while I was asleep, and while I was asleep, I started trembling uncontrollably. Then I began to sweat a bit. My sore throat and headache were at its worst peak by Saturday morning, and for most of the day I felt pain in my throat and forehead too. I was also very fatigued too. I have tried to distract myself from the headaches and sore throat by attempting to grind in Bloxburg, trying to keep myself awake, even though on numerous occasions throughout the day, I couldn't, and I fell asleep for 1 hour or half an hour throughout time after time throughout the day. For several hours, too, I took ice packs in my head as well as having pills to alleviate the pain on my body, yet unfortunately, they weren't too effective on me. Also, on that time, I started to experience difficulty breathing, which for me was the worst part of the illness shit show. And then every night until next Sunday, I would constantly sweat in my sleep, as my body began to detoxify and terminate slowly the illness from my body. At first, I initially denied the fact that I had COVID, and I thought it was the flu for a while, until October 10, 2022, when I scheduled an emergency COVID testing appointment on the morning of that day. That was when I found out I had tested positive for COVID. My reaction to that information was that my heartbeat dropped for about a microsecond, then I became angry and said, "Well, bullshit," after I got back home. I started crying and daydreaming about the fact that my illness would relapse and even go as far as me losing my life. Fortunately, neither was the case. Anyway, shortly after I tested for COVID, my parents went to Publix as they gave me medications that had been proven to help me with curing COVID. And as days went on, the illness started to slowly fade away, and I was now happy that my COVID illness was not going to relapse. Yet the most annoying part was that of the sweating. While I had COVID, I was able to not only grind in Bloxburg, but also to work on my school assignments from home, since I was not able to even attend school since of course I had COVID. The following week, I had to wear a mask for the whole week as I was now receiving the aftershocks of COVID in my body, where although I was able to breathe normally again, I continued to have gases in my chest, occasional coughing, runny nose, and a slight headache that would ease up until the end of that week. In conclusion, I was deeply traumatized about me having COVID. Not so much about the time until I learned more about the effects of COVID and how it can ruin and or kill innocent lives. I then started developing some problems with overthinking about my illness for a while, which often distracted me from my schoolwork and Bloxburg grinding. I was barely happy enough to accept the fact that I survived COVID, because I literally thought that I was going to be a dead man at the time. I was finally able to move on from the tragedy after October 2022 came to a close. But the story did not end there, as another hurricane was now forecast to hit Florida. This time from the other side. The east side this time. The late season Hurricane Nicole was at its highest wind speed of a minimal 75 miles per hour. As the storm began to impact Florida on the 8th of November, I started to record footage of the rain and wind on my phone again. And even though my school refused to close down the day before, still they continued to keep the schools closed for the rest of the week again. And this time I was able to sleep in my bedroom proper this time, instead of a bathtub like last time. Miraculously, I did not lose power in Hurricane Nicole's passing either. And after the system died down, I walked around the neighborhood again to check for the damage. Unfortunately, this time, I did not find any damage in my neighborhood aside from the downed branches and leaves on the road. Again, my school closed down for that long because they had used my school as a place for others to shelter in during the tragedies. Now, this is where the story ends, because after this, my family's life started to become great again, and because of those events, I started to turn back into focusing on my Roman Catholic faith, as I was now rereading the Bible and finally starting to believe in God one more time. And because of this, I've started to attend church regularly this time, more often than I used to before. Therefore, retracing my childhood steps on God's messages with me. Now I'd like to talk about the numerous occasions in which I had been disciplined back in school, which occurred throughout the course of early 2017 to February 2020, and possibly even more than that. The first few times I had been disciplined was when I received from my teachers that they made me sit out of recess in the benches on numerous occasions. This happened because either I had unintentionally disrespected my teachers, I failed to complete an assignment in time, or because I had bad grades in general. Even though I had received this numerous times throughout the latter part of elementary, this wasn't even the worst part of my punishments. As later throughout the second half of 5th grade, I will now be kicked out of the classroom and sent to classrooms next door. Because number one, I quote-unquote mocked the teacher. Number 2 was a general nuisance to the class. Number 3, I once gave out the middle finger to one of my classmates while playing Kahoot one time. And lastly, I often went to the restroom without the teacher's permission. Not only that, I was also held in my classroom as my teacher lectured me and made me stay for several minutes after class was over. The 2 worst punishments that I received in that time was when I was forced to tutor 2nd graders because of me failing to present a brochure that I was supposed to do about the country of Japan and their architecture. And then another time in which my teachers started criticizing me in front of all my friends, and then I was forced to sit down with the school's receptionist at the front of the school in shame. Another punishment I received was when I drew gang symbols on both me and my classmates' arms using Expo dry erase markers. Because of this, they held me in a class for at least half an hour and threatened to kick me out of an upcoming field trip where I was set to go to Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida. After I got home, my parents berated at me for my actions and once again took away my phone privileges. The next day, they made me report to a 4th grade classroom where I was set to be forced to tutor the younger kids. When by last minute, my parents arrived with the supplies needed for the Universal field trip, and I was given one more chance. The happy ending occurred while I was now finally able to travel to Universal with my classmates and my father without any more further hassles for the day. But my disciplinary actions in general did not stop there. It would continue to become even worse as I was now entering middle school. One time, when I was on the Boys and Girls Club summer camp at Hearns Creek Middle, I accidentally threw a small plastic ball at a random student and they threatened to kick me out of summer camp had I continued to harass other students. Another time was when I rage quitted over a game of Uno and they accused me of causing trouble, of me apparently throwing the cards into the ground. Eventually, I convinced the camp counselors to bring me out of the situation. Hence, I got away with it, and no further action was taken against me. The same could not be said for the rest of the students that were also playing Uno. After those fiascos, throughout the course of 6th grade, I would often be sent to lunch detention because of my attitude towards other students in whom they were rivals with me throughout the whole year. One time back in August 2017, they confiscated my school ID because of my rowdy behavior, where every time I would record videos of me in school in passing time, going from one class to the other, I would act in a rowdy manner. I would also use the school elevators without the school faculty's permission. A few days after I failed to report for lunch detention after they confiscated my ID, Mr. Ersick, the 6th grade dean for the school at the time, gave me back my ID. However, in exchange, I was sent to lunch detention for the rest of the day. Lunch detention is a form of school discipline where the students that committed an infraction are forced to sit away from the rest of the students of the cafeteria and are often made to sit alone without talking to anyone else that have also been sent to lunch detention too. It was located on the opposite side of the cafeteria, near the stage. Another time I was sent to lunch detention when I pissed on the bathroom floor instead of the toilet, as I was distracted with talking to another classmate behind me. Shortly thereafter, because of my failing grades in 6th grade again, my parents took away my cell phone privileges, and for over 2 years, my parents would never let me bring my cell phone to school ever again. Unfortunately though, that comes with a consequence, as most of the time I didn't even know where my parents were. If they were at home getting ready to pick me up, or if they were somewhere else unable to pick me up. Nor did my parents know if I was at the front of school waiting for them or not. I remember one time I luckily had one of my friends whose parents picked me up for them as my father was at work and my mother was babysitting one of her friend's baby boy, Mason, for the afternoon, and she was unable to pick me up. Then one time one of my teachers put me on the advisory list and sent me to the library as I was under heavy surveillance as the teachers made me complete an unfinished quizzes assignment that my ancient world history teacher made me do. The advisory list for the middle school is basically when teachers find out that their students have unfinished assignment from their class or another class, and then they send them somewhere else after school to make them complete their unfinished assignments or their poorly performed assignments until their assignments have been completed. Their said assignments have been completed. And this only happened once, and never again it happened, as the advisory list was abolished after 7th grade was over. Speaking of which, fast forwarding to 7th grade, one time one of my classmates in whom they were rivals with me pushed me, and in response I pushed him back, and as a result I had to attend disciplinary Saturday school for 4 hours, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And as for the perpetrator, he got away with it. No action was taken against him. But for me, I was, again, heavily monitored as the people in Saturday school made me only visit educational websites and get classwork done instead of goofing off. Also in that time period, I struggled with a mild case of depression as I repeatedly said phrases such as, "I hate my life, I want to die, kill me please." Not only that, but I will also make several suicidal and immature sex jokes to my peers, in which I got extreme backlash for doing just that. Because of this, I would from time to time talk to my 7th grade counselors on several occasions throughout the course of the school year as they tried their best their best to try and get me to calm down and reassure me that I was going to be okay. Also, meanwhile, during those times, I saw one of my friends running down the courtyard, and so I ran after him as I was now trying to stop them from running by repeatedly asking him, "What happened? What happened?" Because of this, the dean of the school, Mr. Copeland, sent me to lunch detention for chasing my friend like it was some kind of playground or something. And I was the only one that went through lunch detention as I never saw my friend get into lunch detention since he basically got away with it. Another time I threatened one of my classmate rivals by yelling at him, "What the hell are you doing here?" Because of this, I was sent to do teacher and student detention, where they made me sit alone in the classroom with the teacher watching over me before class time started. Another time while I was running out of the classroom, I tripped on the floor and I unintentionally embarrassed my learning strategies teacher as he had reported me to do Saturday school again. But the funny part was, my learning strategies teacher never actually reported me to the school administrators. Therefore, I was free to go for the rest of the day. Another time, I got into a physical altercation with another classmate where we punched each other, and as our teacher threw a hissy fit, unsuccessfully trying to stop us from fighting, until another teacher physically separated me from the person I was fighting with by force. Afterwards, both me and the perpetrator was given a 1-day in-school suspension, where the person I fought also threw a hissy fit while in suspension. I don't know what happened to him after the incident that occurred in school suspension. And also during in school suspension, one of my friends were accused of laughing at Mr. Copeland, the dean of the school, after they made everyone eat lunch silently. There was no substantial evidence to back up the dean's claims, so therefore for the rest of the day he would be sent to Saturday school, which meaning that he was sent to the same room as me. Eventually near the end of the day he got out because the administrators let him got out. And I support his claims, and I support my friend's claims. He didn't actually laugh, and he was just sighing in disappointment. Anyways, aside from this would be where my first stage of depression peaked, and that happened back in February 2019. As the next time I will meet with my counselors again, they had sent me to the police, and they themselves had threatened to send me to a psychological therapist had I continued, which fortunately I did not. Another time I was goofing off in the school courtyard trying to emulate parkour, as both me and another random student was reprimanded by a library employee for the incident. After being warned, I was soon let go. Another time, another math teacher caught me cheating by using calculator websites to solve math problems that I was too lazy to even solve at all, on Khan Academy and also iReady. I again was reprimanded and told not to use calculator websites anymore. Funny enough, I ignored the warnings and anyway continued to use the said websites. Another time I said to another student, "You're gay," and he tattletaled me as my teacher called the dean. But luckily enough, the dean was not there to answer the call, so fortunately I got away with it. Another time I put one of my classmates on a chokehold to make him stop doing annoying noises such as yee and blah 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 blah. And I saw the dean walking up to me, and I ran away just in time so that the dean couldn't see me, and luckily I got away with it. Fast forwarding to 8th grade, I was reprimanded on several occasions as I was inappropriately poking one of my classmates' testicles on numerous occasions, and this was the closest that I have ever been to being arrested, in my opinion. Because the police themselves warned me that if I continued to do that, they would arrest me, because of course that's against the law. Afterwards, because of my missing assignments, especially the missing assignments that I didn't do on iReady, I was forced to come to school on a Saturday just so I could finish up the missing work I had at the time, which of course included iReady reading and math, which was something I kept forgetting on and also refusing to do. Because in my school, it was a policy, it was a rule for everyone to complete at least one iReady lesson and have at least 45 minutes studying on the website per week, which was something that I of course was reluctant to always do. And because of me refusing to do I-rated assignments, my teachers and parents decided to put pressure on me to do at least 4 different I-rated lessons and at least 60 minutes per week, which at first seemed unrealistic, but at the end it was all doable as I endured the rage and trauma that my parents and teachers forced upon me. Afterwards, I would inappropriately touch one of my teacher's service dogs by booping their nose repeatedly, along with me T-posing random girls, blocking girls from walking their way simply by saying, "You shall not pass," repeatedly. Because of this, I was often accused of being sexist by the students and even teachers, and this prompted my 8th grade dean, Mr. Copeland, to reprimand me. Shortly afterwards, I would anyways continue to harass those random girls in my school by repeatedly blowing on their hair, as well as playfully threatening to pull their hair off of their scalp, which again both my PE coach and my 8th grade dean again reprimanded me. Then again, my dean caught me once again harassing the same girls once again. And before I was disciplined, I got into a mental breakdown and complained to another administrator to try and convince my dean to not punish me. Unfortunately, I was successful at doing so. Hence, in my statement for I had to fill out before I got disciplined, I tried to justify my actions. But still, my parents would too also find out about the situation because my dean told my parents about the situation, and because of this, I was sent to do Saturday school almost a month later after the initial situation went down. Fast forwarding 1 year later, where my avid teacher, Miss Weber, announced that I was going to be given a personal schedule assignment, I criticized her and said that the assignment saying the schedule was unnecessary. Because of this, I made the teacher apparently uncomfortable, and she kicked me out of the online classroom. I tried to join back in and apologize to her, yet unfortunately I was unsuccessful at doing so. Eventually, I was IP banned from my remote learning classroom session, as I would eventually apologize to my teacher in a private email minutes after the situation concluded. She forgave me for what I did, and then I moved on. Fast forwarding 1 year later, I again got into trouble again, where my school dean accused me of harassing random students in the classroom by repeatedly shouting at them, "Yee-mo!" as well as me making weird noises in front of them. I was reprimanded by the dean, but no further action was taken. Hence, the week after the incident, I was called to talk to my behavioral specialist about the situation, as he also reported to my parents about the many different times in which I also ate paper in class too. He even threatened to put me on social skills classes, which is something I didn't do. And even though I was close in starting to do social skills classes, that never happened. Since then, I haven't been formally disciplined nor warned about anything else ever again from school after October 2022. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed and listened perfectly my interesting long form stories. Anyways, this is all I have to say here. So if you want to see more videos, please subscribe to me. So therefore, goodbye for now.